All right, we just kind of breezed over the image prep that was necessary for my background and creepy doll image. What we're going to do is take a look at next kind of just the layout process. Now, what I'm actually going to suggest you look at doing is wireframing this. So you could do some hand sketches to kind of just rough out what your intent is for this and kind of represent paragraph areas, etc. But I'm going to suggest that you set your document up and look at just kind of wireframing where placeholders may go for elements in your document. That's gonna help you kind of visualize the overall kind of look and block of elements in it. So what I'm gonna do is just start with my document creation. So first, just to show you, my document was set up to eventually be a finished size of 8 inches by 8 inches. Now, kind of like the diagram that I showed you, I had to account for the full, that I showed you in the last video, I had to account for the full spread. So mine, instead of being 10 inches by 10 inches, I had 8 inches, 8 inches, I had my 1/4 inch spine, and I had my specific bled outline on it to allow for the trim. So I had to figure out exactly what size I needed that imagery at to begin with, and I set that document up around that. So the size that I came with was, or ended up with, was 16 1/4 by 8 in width by 8 inches in height. I then, in the bleed settings of the document, added 1/8 inch bleed all the way around. So I'll show you what I need, but the key is you always set document up to trim size and then add bleeds on afterward. So let's go with that document setup to start. So I ran file new document. Now, first thing you'll notice is when you bring this up, I have inches set up for my units. If I go way in, just so you can see, set up in inches. What's common is if this is the first time you've opened InDesign, you may not have that set up. So if you're in that situation, go check your preferences to start, and go in and take a look at your units in increments. So on PC side, that's going to be under Edit Preferences, but on Mac, it's under the InDesign menu. So my units and increments, I'll go in and check, and I have my spread to be set up in inches, both horizontal and vertical. I also have my other units as points for strokes and points for fonts. So much like our work in Illustrator, we typically think of um, typography and points and lines and points. So with my units and increments set up, now I'll make a new document. All right, we'll go and take a look. First, by default, I want to make sure that this is set up with print intent. That's going to give me the resolution I need, and there are ways of customizing this. We'll talk about that in class. Facing pages, I want facing pages unchecked for this. That would be for building page spreads or reader spreads like in a magazine. We're doing a cover, so we're doing what's called flat work. I'm then going to preset this for my document size, which was 16.25 by a height of 8. I'm then going to go in and check out columns. I won't need to adjust this because I'm going to be building all my text columns and things in the document. Margins, I'm going to leave at 1/2 inch. That's nice to have for a reference to page trim edge because you'll need to remember all of your graphics are, if you push text to the edge and it trims, it might look a little bit odd and crowded. So that's nice to have that reference. Bleed, I'm using 1/8 inch bleeds for this document. So I will either dial in 0.125 inches, or if you want to use the math functions, I can do 1 divided by 8, click over, and my bleeds have been completely applied. So basically, with this dialog set, I'm ready to go, and I'm going to say OK. Awesome. So here's my setup. I check my original document setup example, 8 by 16.125 or 16.25. I'm now at 8 by 16.25. Same exact setup, just looks a little bit bigger, so maybe scale it down so they look similar when I jump back and forth. All right, what I'm going to do first is again go through that layout process. You can work with wireframing to kind of ease what you're doing and kind of plan on what you're doing. You can also work with layers to do that. So the first thing that I would do is save this file out. Take a look at the naming conventions on the project, but for now, I'm just going to make a new document in here. I named mine to my project. I named my project to fit within a folder for submission, but we'll call this OS Keef CMG 141. We'll say my section is 001. This is Sketchpad, and I'll set this to be my color version. And say OK and save it. All right, now what I have is I have an area basically set up for the document. So the first thing I would recommend is that you set a spine marker down and work with basically some guides to help guide you. Now you have multiple layers in your layer tab. I also have a few other windows set up as well that I'm going to be working with. So I guess before I lay the guides, I'll kind of check those out just to show you how I started my window workspace. I started in Essentials, which I'm going to reset right now to show you what Essentials is. Now there's some things that I may need and won't need in there. So pages I won't need at all. I'm going to dump that out and delete it because I'm not working with spreads or magazines. I'm just doing a flat cover. I will need layers, links, stroke, probably colors, maybe swatches. I'll maybe use that later. I'm not going to use Adobe stock library, so I can drag that out and delete it, but I am going to need a few other things. So I'm going to go under Window, and I'm going to look under Type and Tables and grab a couple of menu items. So Character is definitely one that I'm going to want. I'll save that out. That's going to allow me to select fonts, work with things like my leading or line spacing, my kerning and tracking, adjustment of character spacing. I'm then going to grab my paragraph window because I'm definitely going to need that for controlling text eventually in the paragraph body of my piece. I'm then going to grab a text wrap window too because I have text wrap applied. I added this back element of this doll and I set the text to kind of flow around the doll. So text wrap is what I'm going to use to control that. So we'll go back over. So with these windows set up, I've basically created a customized workspace. So I think I'll go ahead and actually just save that. I can either do that up here in my workspace selection, or I can do that from the window workspaces, but I'll do it right here. I'll choose this one. I'll call this book cover layout. There we go. I'm going to save it. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go set up for a key area. I need to know where the spine is on this. That's a big issue. If I don't plan for my spine, I could have graphics wrapping around it, etc., and that may look weird if it's off on the bind. So what I'm going to do is if I click, you can click into any border here where the rulers are, and if for some reason you're not seeing rulers, you'll want to check to see View and check that this is as Show Rulers, not Hide Rulers. I want to show them. And then I'm going to just click into that. I'm just left clicking and drag out, and that's going to give me a guide. Now what you notice is in the upper left, it might be kind of hard to see. I'll zoom in on it. If I let go of this guide, I have it selected still. Go in, and I have an X position on the document. What I like to do is I like to set a center guide and then 2 split out guides for the edges of the spine. So I'm going to set this to center first. Now there's 2 ways I could do it. I could just do the math ahead of time and figure out where center is in the X position, or I could use InDesign's math to do that. So since my document was 16.25 in size, I'll just divide it by 2. And my guide should be set at 8.125 inches. If I move over, there we go. There's my guide at 8.125 inches. If I zoom out, there's my guide set to center. Now I can use that as a reference. So I'll just drag another guide out, and I'll go 8.125 minus another 1/8 of an inch. And I know an 1/8 of an inch is 0.125, so I will just kind of dial that in. 8.125 minus 0.125 and hit enter. There I have the left side of my spine. I'll do another one. 8.125 plus 0.125. And now I have an awesome spine indicator that's going to show me center, the left side of the bind, and the right side of the bind. So that's the first thing I would set up. From here, what you can do is you can use some organization and start working with your layers to plan on what you're going to do. So this layer actually contains my guides. If I turn it on and off, my guides are gone. So I'm going to go in and just name that. You can double click on it. Guides. I like to have a separate layer for my guides. It's what I do. If I want other guides on there at all, like for example, to maybe see where the center split is, I could snap a center line guide to use on this side if I desire that. I'm not going to undo it, but we'll save that. Now I'm going to make other layers for other stuff, like maybe I'll have this be the front cover text. Maybe I'll make a background images layer. Oops, my front cover text didn't stick. Front cover text. Maybe I'll make a back cover text as well, and I can kind of start to organize my stuff as I go. So you can build within these layers as you work with them. You can also lock them if you don't want to accidentally access them. So I think what I'll do first is kind of take a look at my front cover text. Now, it's nice to have an idea of where that's going to be in relation to your image, so you can kind of work nonlinear with this, but I'll grab just my front cover text layer to start with, and I'm going to go in and just kind of wireframe out what I want here. So again, I have text here. I kind of have a title and subtitle. I did this in 2 text boxes. I could do this in 1, but for this purpose of this project, I'm just kind of okay with beginner stuff. So I go in and just kind of rough lay out that front cover text area. And what I'm going to do is grab the Tool tab. There we go. I like to condense the view like that. And I'm going to grab the Text or Type tool. And that's going to allow me to kind of lay wireframing out to start with. And I'm going to kind of work within my margin, so I know that everything beyond this is a 1/2 inch until it's trimmed. So I kind of put a box for the main title. If I want to, I can call that title by actually naming the text box. There we go. Title. I could make another box. In fact, if I want to, I can hold Alt and just click and drag to make quick copies if I want elements to be similarly sized. So maybe I'll call this, I can get into it, subtitle in the layers, my title, my subtitle. I kind of have placeholders for this stuff. I can then go to my back cover and take a look at what I want to do. So on my back cover, I eventually had some text. Now this box actually had to be rotated, and I actually did it after typing it, but you could do it beforehand. And then I have 2 paragraph blocks that are going to be included. So what I'm going to do is go in and just set those reference elements up first. So with my front stuff, I'm going to go to my back stuff now, work with my my back cover content. So I'll just take my type tool, and I'm going to check my edge text, which at approximately like this. Only the problem is if I go like this, I don't get the text working the way that I want. So what I'll do is I'll just make a text box normally like this. I'm going to take the standard arrow, just the black regular selection tool that manipulates stuff, and rotate it. And clue, if you hold Shift, it'll snap to right angles, common angles. Then I can resize. Now this is ready for type, so when I type, it'll actually type vertically. All right, so I've set that one in, and I can name that double clicking on the text. I'll call this left title vertical so I can look at it. Maybe I'll make a couple other boxes now. I'm going to have my text frames. So for actually applying the text, maybe my vertical title's a little bit big. I can move that over. And I'll just kind of make a copy of this. And this is kind of rough to start, but what I'm doing is just trying to get kind of a visual representation of the way everything looks in addition to the spine. So maybe I want to balance it out a little bit so that I've got a good area between my trim edge and my spine are kind of similar. And basically I have I'll just call these paragraph text. Maybe I call it P text. So I got kind of two boxes, my P text 1 and 2 to work with. And basically I've just kind of set everything up. Now, what I didn't do is I didn't make placeholders for my background images. You can actually go in and add placeholders for those images using framing tools as well. I've built mine to size in advance, so I'm just going to drop them in, but you can drop framing tools in to be placeholders for images and text. So let's say just for safety's sake, I'm going to click the little locks on this layer panel so that I don't accidentally drop it in there. And I can also hide it if I don't want to see these other elements. But I'll go in and just, I could draw out a framing tool if I wanted to fill the full frame. That would be intended to be my background image and eventually fill totally with the background image. But if you set your images up ahead of time, they should be exactly the size that you want them to be. So basically I kind of started, I'll leave that one and then I'll just place my other one. But what I've done is I've gone through, unlock, and I've just given myself a layer system to use to kind of guide where everything's going to be in my design. And I can turn those layers off to get an idea of the way the piece is eventually going to look. So my document setup, there's my guides applied, and I can reorder this stuff if I want to as well, but my guides have been applied. I then have a placeholder for my background image, ready to accept an image. I have my front cover text, just kind of blocked out. I have my back cover text, and then I have just a reference of the way that stuff is going to look before I actually go to make it. So wireframing is a useful tool for visually balancing and laying things out. For a cover, it's one thing, but as we get on to more advanced work, or you get into other classes where you're building more advanced work, like multi-page layouts, often you visually wireframe those out ahead of doing any of the element design. All right, we'll move on to the next video.